How's it going, everybody? This is Travis Platt Reviews, and I spent the majority of this year being very positive. So now it's my time to be negative and go over the worst albums of 2020. If you're new to the channel, thank you so much for watching. Here at Travis Platt Reviews, my goal is to highlight the best of the underground in any genre from rap to rock to metal. And if you like what you hear, please consider subscribing and turning on post notifications. Also, be sure to give this video a like and comment below if there's another album you'd like me to review. Also, I've been way more active on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok lately, so if you want more from me, you can go and follow me on all three. It's at Travis Platt Reviews. So, without further ado, let's go and jump right into the video. I've listened to over 250 albums and EPs that were released in the year 2020. Some great and some not so great. And today we're going to discuss the latter. Some rules before we start: the albums must have been released on streaming services, specifically Spotify, because it is the one I use, and they must be easily accessible to listen to. Also, no live albums, no demo albums, and no deluxe edition albums. They must be studio full-length albums, so no EPs either. Also, I never try to listen to bad music for the fun of it, so these albums are releases I had interest in prior. So, no Psychosexual will be on this list, and neither will Trapped.
Believe in yourself, 'cause everybody dies.
With those out of the way, let's jump into some dishonorable mentions, which I decided not to include for one reason or another, but I wanted to at least mention. Rap artist Mike Shinoda is most known for his work with legendary rock band Linkin Park, and in 2018 he released his solo album Post Traumatic, which had a lot of good stuff on it, showing an emotional hip-hop side of Mike that we haven't heard much from before. Over COVID, he decided to create 3 albums titled Dropped Frames, Volume 1, 2, and 3, where he streamed the creation of these songs with help from fans, and because these aren't officially studio albums, I chose not to include them on the main list, but I did not enjoy any of these albums. I'm all for instrumental music, but on most of these songs, the production and instrument choices were odd, and most of the songs were very wonky and annoying to listen to. The second album of this trilogy is my personal favorite, with the tracks Transitions, Crystalina, and Dungeon Crawler being pretty cool, but this feels like a bunch of songs that would be better off scrapped. Remo Drive, when can you learn to write good music again? The band had one of the best debuts of the past decade with their album Greatest Hits in 2017, with a ton of fun yet angsty energy. But the band seemed to change their sound as soon as they established it with their EP Pop Music in 2018 and their album Natural Everyday Degradation in 2019, which in my opinion was the worst album of 2019. The bland performance was dreadful to sit through, and despite their third album, A Portrait of an Ugly Man, being better, it still has the same flaws as their previous work. This album is harmless in the worst way possible. Nothing happens at all, and all of the songs run together for a bland, uninspired indie pop record. This is the most notable on the tracks True Romance Lives and If I've Ever Looked Too Deep in Thought. Maybe the band should look deep into writing better music, because this album is yet another nail in the coffin for them. The only reason this is not number 1 on this list is because it is a remaster of the band's 2019 album. Relent is one of the newest bands to the Christian rock label Rockfest Records, which has a lot of bands that I do love, including The Protest, Amongst the Giants, and The Persuaded. And on paper I should really like Relent, as I am a fan of the revival of early 2000s nu metal. But the thing that makes me really dislike this album is the bland instrumentals and cringeworthy lyrics. This is one of the worst albums I have ever heard lyrically. The hook's like, And other nauseating lyrics run rampant through this 9-song, 33-minute album, which closes with a cover of the DC Talk song Jesus Freak, if things couldn't get any worse. This band has potential, they just need to mature in sound and do the exact opposite of what they did on this body of work. Seaway has never been my favorite pop-punk band in any regard, as I've always thought of them as being better with singles compared to albums, this being very evident on their 2017 album Vacation, which is actually my favorite album by them. But with Big Vibe, Seaway continued with the same formula for the past 3 years, making bland, stale, overly positive pop-punk, with no lyrics having any amount of substance. The title track feels like a song you'd hear inside of a Target on Memorial Day, and this sound is consistent throughout the entire album. Still Blue has an obnoxious chorus. The mixing on Wild Things is horrendous, and the only tracks I personally enjoy are Pathetic, which has a really nice chorus, and Sweet Sugar, where the attempt of groove actually lands for the first and only time. Seaway really needs to go back to the drawing board for their next album, rather than recycling what has worked in the past. Rock band Framing Hanley was an important part of my childhood and early teen years, with their songs Hear Me Now, You Stupid Girl, and You being some of my favorite songs growing up. And after the band returned from their hiatus in 2018 with their song Puzzle Pieces, I thought the song was pretty good, and I was wondering how the album would end up, and we got a very boring radio rock album. The album has a few strong moments like Forgiveness is an Art and Bubbles, but the second half of this album is abysmal. The songs are copy and pasted versions of the same song, with no tempo changes at all, and no creativity. With generic lyrics like in the track The Way Down, this album goes in one ear and out the other. Okay, here's where things get really bad. Green Day have really had a really rough past 10 years, with their trilogy albums Uno, Dos, and Tre all being horrible. And Revolution Radio, despite being a step up, still had its bland moments. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame punk group have fallen from grace with their worst album to date, Father of All. The band promoted this album as being only live instruments, no Swedish songwriters, no features, only pure rock and roll. And what we got makes rock and roll look like the worst kind of music imaginable. The title track alone shows so much unneeded processing and a megaphone effect on vocalist Billie Joe Armstrong's voice. And this never leaves. Oh Yeah is one of the worst tragedies to ever crawl into radio rock in over a decade. And radio rock has to deal with every single Five Finger Death Punch song. The chorus of this song is truly dreadful, and it hurts my head to even listen to. The lyrics of the song I Was a Teenager make me regret ever being a teenager. And the instrumentation is painfully bland. And don't even get me started on Junkies on a High. Overall, I cannot figure out who the target audience of this album is, because there is nothing enjoyable about it. And yet there are still 2 albums worse. So I know a lot of people are talking about Trapped shadow work, but I think this album is even worse. Adelita's Ways, Shine On is one of the most pandering heavy, mad and attempting, disgusting pieces of rock music I have ever listened to. And this band had massive hits in the 2000s. Invincible, Criticize, Dog on a Leash, Cage the Beast were all great songs. Even their last album, Notorious, had some solid moments. But this band has tried so hard to be an entrance theme to a WWE mid-carder, and it shows on every single song. Lyrically, the band sings about nothing for over 45 minutes. All In is one of the most bland songs I've ever heard, and I've listened to Skillet's last 2 albums. This album makes the new Skillet sound like a masterpiece. The vocal processing on the track Shine On actually gives me a headache. And the track What You Want contends RX by Theory of a Dead Man as one of the worst rock songs of all time. Down for Anything sounds like a middle schooler trying to ask a girl to the dance, and I hate to bring age into this, but Rick De Jesus is 37 years old, writing music with the brain capacity of a child. The band also re-released their track Something More off of their album Stuck without changing anything about the song at all. It just adds an extra 3 unnecessary minutes to the album. Overall, I hate this album so much, and I think everything wrong about Radio Rock is visible on this album. But there's one album that I think is even worse, and it is Asking Alexandria was once one of the top metalcore bands of all time, with fantastic records Stand Up and Scream and Reckless and Relentless. But on their 2013 album From Death to Destiny, they went into more of a hard rock territory. And then Danny Worsnop ended up leaving the band, becoming a country singer, and drove from the UK to Mexico.
I'm driving my ass to Mexico.
AA replaced him with Dennis Scoff, and they released The Black, arguably their heaviest record to date, until Danny Worsnop came crawling back to the band, and they released their self-titled album in 2017, which I do think is pretty solid. But SiriusXM Octane ate this up, and the band went on huge tours with Shinedown and Papa Roach. And then, the disaster of a first single on their new album, The Violence, was released, with a horribly annoying hook and a horrible verse, with a ridiculous amount of vocal manipulation. And the sad thing is, this track is the most interesting song on the entire album. We got one of the most bland, uninspired, lazy pieces of work I have ever heard, with nothing worth listening. The lead single, Anti-Socialist, has a horribly bland chorus only meant to make middle-aged truckers throw up their metal horns before crashing their vehicle. The ending of the chorus is exactly how I feel about this album. Take Some Time actually makes me want to throw up, and the production on this album is disgusting, and I'm normally a fan of Matt Good's work. Every time a trap beat appears in this album, it is done in such a way that is the furthest thing from tasteful or clever. It is always randomly thrown in just to make them seem hip. It is obvious the band phoned in an album with the sole purpose of making more money, and there is no level of artistry here. On the final track, one lyric resonates with me, and I truly think it's how the band feels. Alright, so those are the worst albums of 2020 in my opinion. Do you agree? Disagree? Whichever it is, comment below, and thanks for watching.